Hello, and welcome to episode 153 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. I'm your host, Devon Dundee. I'm joined by my co-host, Sigmund Judge. Sigmund, how's it going?
It's going well. And you're looking well as well, which is good to see.
Thank you.
A far more chilled out week this week. Lots of putting my feet up and watching my beloved Apple TV, because of course this is an Apple TV podcast, but you know what that means. It means we are going to talk once again to head up this show, talking about Apple Vision Pro, but I think from a different perspective this week. Now, this time last year was a bit of a frenzied time because I think I at least was getting ready for pre-order. I didn't know at this point that you'd also place an order for an Apple Vision Pro. It was a very, very exciting time, but there's something that we haven't really ever touched on, and that is the kind of financial implications of purchasing a $3,500, starting at $3,500 computer for your face. We haven't really talked about the tech bro kind of aura of Vision Pro, and I guess any new platform. So I wanted to kind of rewind a little bit now that we've had 12 months with Apple Vision Pro. I wanted to talk about our different experiences with regard to that, because I do think, and I know this through a couple of conversations that I've had inadvertently, that we've kind of been lumped in with, I don't know, some of the crowd that we wouldn't necessarily associate with.
Yeah, I think that's been part of my hesitation sometimes to talk about the Vision Pro too much. Of course, it comes up often here on the show, but I've done virtually no writing about it, which is something that surprises even me a year later. I think part of my hesitation about speaking about it too much and in certain contexts, like a lot of people in my day-to-day life don't see me using it. I'll use it in my office, and certain people have come across me using it, but it's not something I necessarily make a big deal about or out doing lots of demos with people. And I think part of that is just a little bit of maybe preemptive embarrassment about owning this $3,500 thing that a lot of people would consider frivolous or silly or unnecessary or not useful, and trying to put into words how, for me, it's not frivolous, it's an investment and a tool that I use every day. I think that's something that I've still been kind of wrapping my mind around and trying to put into words. But I hit a point this week where I feel like maybe I'm coming to a bit of a turn, and that is actually, I finished paying off my Vision Pro this week on my Apple Card. I did the 12-month installments. It's a great feature, the Apple Card, that I wish was available to more people internationally, but they're still US only right now, unfortunately. That to me was a pretty big deal, to have this device that we've been talking about for so long, that I wanted and wasn't sure if it was going to be able to happen, and then eventually sat down with my budget, thought about some work that I could take on, thought about some things that I could skip over the coming year to kind of help make that happen in a way that wouldn't affect my family's bottom line, ability to pay our bills and things like that. And, it wasn't just a split-second decision for me. Listeners of this show probably know that even after pre-orders went live, I thought that it wasn't going to be something I was going to do. And it changed in that intermediary time between when pre-order started and when the device actually released. But for me, I think it's just been a little bit of a struggle to figure out how to communicate that, yes, I am an early adopter. I love to be on the cutting edge, but for me, this is a tool that I'm doing work with. This is an investment in not only my own work now, but in being on top of what's happening in computing and hopefully being ahead of what's happening in the future.
I mean, especially from a production background, right? Maybe in the far, far future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to stay on top of. I mean, we've seen people doing the work that I do with Vision Pros. You get 5 or 6 of them in a production room, and you got a bunch of people staring at a wall instead of sitting in front of all these sliders and stuff. And it's pretty cool. And I think that's where it could go. But for me, being able to communicate that in a way that doesn't give off that kind of bro-y aspect of it, of just trying to be on top of whatever's new and cool and just, having it for any sort of prestige or whatever. That's not what it's about for me. And it's also not a device that sits in a drawer for me and I just use, every once in a while to watch a movie or, just try out different apps and things. This is next to me on my shelf right now. It's charged up. I have every intention of putting it on as soon as we finish this recording to start working on show notes, because that's how I do our show notes, with 8 different windows all spread out, collecting links and stuff. And, it really just, for me, it's my computer. It was my computer purchase for at least a couple years, if not several years. I'm not updating any of my other hardware in the meantime. This is the investment that I've made into my computing life, and I'm really happy with it at this point, and having paid it off, that feels pretty great. But I do think it's good to talk about what goes into these decisions, kind of pull back the curtain a little bit. I know finances can be kind of taboo to talk about, but I think it's better to hear people's lived experiences of these things rather than just making assumptions about, what goes into these decisions and how they're made. Did you have kind of a similar experience with purchasing and thinking about talking about the Vision Pro?
For me, I always knew that I would want to have the first hardware from a new platform, right? I never had the first iPad. I never had the first iPhone. I didn't have the first iPod. My first hardware, that I had day and date were the AirPods, right? So I wanted to have that experience of really having the experience of seeing how an app store grows for a new platform, that kind of thing. But also, thanks to the years and years of rumors ahead of Vision OS and Apple Vision Pro, I was able to kind of put some money away, set some money aside, and have a head start on being able to afford an Apple Vision Pro. So that's how I kind of went about it. I am not shy about having an Apple Vision Pro because I want everyone to at least try the immersive video element of the platform. And yeah, I love it. I worry a little bit about when the next iteration will come and what I will do. I mean, yeah, because...
the traded value on the first gen's not going to be great, right?
Well, maybe it will through Apple. We'll have to wait and see how Apple go about it with their trade-in in-store when that time does come. And whether or not I actually want to give up the first generation of Apple Vision Pro. Maybe that's something that I want to be in my collection. I wanted to talk about this purely because there'd been a couple conversations that I've had recently with friends of the show and one previous guest of the show who did kind of make the assumptions of, well, you've got lots of money and you can just do everything you want. And no, like I've forsaken a holiday last year. I rarely go out because of different situations that I live with, both from me and my family who need me. So there is always a lot of making decisions and deciding what you're going to forgo for a big purchase like this. At least for us, we are lowly podcasters on Magic Rays of Light, right? Writing and very passionate about everything from the entertainment and computing world of Apple. And I just wanted to make that kind of clear.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's also important to say that for a lot of people, buying the Vision Pro is not possible or just not worth it yet. And that's completely understandable. We're not here to make anybody feel bad or left out. We're sharing our enthusiasm to hopefully see this platform grow over time and become something that more and more people have access to. But it's totally understandable that right now it's an early adopter product that a lot of people are just, reading about and listening to on podcasts. And that's totally understandable as well. Everyone has to make those decisions for themselves. But I do think it's good to be transparent and, talk about what went into our decisions to make those purchases. But we are an Apple TV podcast after all. There's a ton happening in the world of Apple TV this week, and we're going to cover all of it. Coming up on the show this week, we're going to recap Silo's sophomore season. We're going to talk about screen technology, HDR, and gatekeeping. We've got Sigmund's TV app holiday gift review of Believe Me. I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on that. But we begin with our highlight of today's premiere of Apple original thriller, Prime Target. The world's greatest mind is now the most wanted. A brilliant young mathematician is on the verge of a major breakthrough when he realizes an unseen enemy is trying to destroy his idea. Together with a government agent who's been tracking him, he begins to unravel a troubling conspiracy.
What if numbers didn't behave the way we assume?
Your work is the cornerstone to all digital security. Bank accounts, defense systems, government records. Do you know how valuable, how dangerous you become? I want to help you.
I don't need help.
Yes, you do.
If someone built a key that could pick every digital lock in the world, we're talking global chaos.
If we can't stop this weapon from being created, we have to control it.
I want to fight back.
The series is created by Steve Thompson, who created Jericho and is also a Sherlock alum. It's produced by New Regency with Scott Free Productions as part of an overall first look deal with Apple. And it stars Leo Whittle and Quintessa Swindle in the lead roles. Sigmund, tell us a little bit about what's happening with Prime Target as it kicks off this week.
Well, this is, as has been explained, I think in the trailer. We talked about this briefly last week, about the trailer seeming almost like a bit of a parody in some ways, because it is asking for a lot of the audience to kind of go for the ride, I think. But this show is about a postgraduate mathematician student who discovers an effort to destroy his work in finding a pattern in prime numbers that would unlock every computer in the world and inadvertently create a weapon that would destroy the modern world, from online banking to political structure, and most of all would readdress the Platonic plates of power. What this is a globe-hopping mystery in the guise of Good Will Hunting meets the Bourne films, but with Matt Damon's Jason Bourne being replaced by Leo Whittle's Edward Brooks, who is under attack from higher powers scheming to destroy his work and kill anything and anyone that could be getting closer to the truth. Quintessa Swindle plays Taylor, an NSA operative who's tasked with surveilling anyone working on this prime number theory, but soon finds herself in danger and on the side of Edward. And, well, we've got 2 episodes that premiere this week, and despite the exciting premise, I've got to say the debut episode is a little dull, falls victim to the tropes of many a premiere episode before it, trying to introduce a story with multiple regions and timelines, and with it, too many characters within its 49-minute runtime for the first episode. The second episode allows things to get going. There's, of course, always a strategy behind when a streamer decides to introduce a new property with 1, 2, or 3 premiere episodes. 2, I think, just about delivers what you need on a premiere week. And this is really a prime example of why a feature-length introduction to a series is often needed. And if you are up for giving yourself away to this drama and just going, you know what, I'm going to start this and I'm just going to go with it. By the end of the second episode, there's some well-deserved payoff. They're my initial thoughts on the first 2 premiere episodes, but I have seen the whole season.
Oh, wow. I've watched the first 2, and I have to agree with you that they really do go together, and you kind of need both of them to really evaluate whether or not you're going to jump into the series or not. I feel like that's kind of a trend, not only with Apple TV Plus series, but kind of streaming in general. You really got to give a show 2 episodes nowadays before you can really understand what it is and whether or not you should stick with it. At least that's my point of view. We're kind of past the days of like a pilot episode and that broadcast mentality. So I think the 2 episode premiere made a lot of sense. I got kind of a little bit of vibes of Before from the first episode, where we're kind of just following Edward as he goes from conversation to conversation with all these different people without a lot of context about why they matter and, who they really are to him. But the show does fill in the gaps kind of later. It's just kind of relying on that mystery of, okay, who's this person, to keep you on your toes and I guess force you to start filling in the blanks before it fully gives you the answer. There was a conversation he had with someone who brought kids to the school, and they were talking about Edward's mom, who is for whatever reason not in the picture anymore. And I had no idea who that guy was. Walking away from that conversation, the second episode, I think we get a little bit more clarity about, who this person is. But the other thing about the first episode that really threw me is that Quintessa Swindle isn't in it.
Yeah.
She's a one of the leads, and she just doesn't appear in the first episode. But that second episode, I think, does pay off in a lot of ways of introducing her and introducing her connection to Edward and how they're going to eventually end up on this crash course to, as I mentioned last week when we talked about the trailer, you got to save the math, Sigmund. Well, you've seen the entire series, and we're not going to spoil anything for anybody, but can you just give us a little bit of an idea of kind of the pacing and how we get into it? Does it pick up?
It does, but it does take time to get there with the action picking up towards, I'd say, the end of the series. And there are a few action sequences that are surprising, both in terms of where they're placed, but also some of the violence. It's kind of like, whoa, okay. Wasn't expecting that. There's a fair bit to explore here with a flashback to another Cambridge student in 1994 who comes across the same mathematical thesis, and the clues she leads to her own research being discovered years later. Then there's an archaeological element to this series that takes place in Baghdad, Iraq, with an ancient discovery filled with centuries of old equations that will add extra weight to the mathematical hypothesis of Edwards. That's where I think, the first episode, especially what you were saying with regard to Edward and like his family situation. Some of these things don't really make sense when they first happen, but what they're doing is they're introducing different elements, not only to the story, but also building a picture of Edward's character, who, I've got to be honest, in the first episode, isn't particularly likeable. He is very much a loner and socially awkward, and that is because he's being all consumed by these number patterns, which aren't explained particularly well. Maths is an element to this, but this isn't a show where you're going to need to grab your calculator at any point, because we never really get to see much of what's being scrawled and have any of it really make too much sense. The mathematics is very much a vehicle to allow the story to continue.
Yeah, there's a scene in the second episode where Taylor is talking to a coworker, and the coworker asks her, "Do you understand all this math? Are we supposed to understand all this?" And she goes, "Oh no, that's for somebody else to deal with." And I thought that was a little wink to the viewer. It's like, you don't have to wrap your mind all around this. We'll explain it to you. Don't worry.
It's interesting you say that. 'Cause there's a point later on that I will mention with regard to how serious the show takes itself, But again, the first couple of episodes get us acquainted with Edward and his social awkwardness and his relationships that are otherwise consumed by the patterns that he sees day to day, along with an awkward relationship with his on-off-again boyfriend, and equally the dynamic between himself and his professor. I don't want to say too much, but the professor kind of seems like a baddie at first. But I think as you get into the second episode, you kind of understand, there may be an element in which he's trying to protect Edward from kind of unraveling too much. Unfortunately, though, there's lots of filler and long drawn out moments that, would otherwise be cut from a feature film. And the show does test your patience. Lots of numbers that aren't explained, lots of pouting and scorning at the camera from Edward. There's also plenty of deception and twists and turns that I personally saw a mile off because I don't think much of the show is scripted too well. And really, it does rely on the main premise too much without really giving any insight into the system that carries so much jeopardy. Not once does this silly adventure ever wink at the camera, although you think it does. I don't. I think instead it kind of has this assured confidence to take itself seriously without ever having the confidence in its writing to allow the audience to take it on at the same level. So maybe I just missed that wink, but I personally, I just didn't see it. But, you know, these things are different in other people's eyes. Even though I think this show takes itself way too serious for how preposterous some of the story is, it does allow itself to be fun, right? And the cast within the series do enough to elevate this story to enjoyable. Farfi as Edward's on and off again boyfriend, Stephen Ray as a professor at Cambridge who wields an incredible power, Sidsi Badsit Newson as a professor studying ancient Baghdad, and Martha Plimpton as Jane Torres, the head of the NSA, who has a connection to Taylor, and her performance as this government operative is really the standout of the series. Think Kristen Scott Thomas and her portrayal of Diana Travanier from Slow Horses. That's to the level I think her performance is. So very cool.
Wow, that's high praise. I was excited when I saw Martha Plimpton in the trailer. I know her, funny enough, from a sitcom she did called Raising Hope back in the day. With the creator of My Name is Earl. That was kind of the comedy that she was doing, and that's the only thing I've ever actually seen her in. So seeing her take on this more serious role, I'm excited to see that, and hearing how much you enjoyed it, I think that's going to be a highlight for me as well once we get there. I think my big question for you, and the one that listeners are going to want to know, is, having experienced this series, would you say this is one to watch week to week, or would it make more sense to wait till closer to the finale and kind of binge it all leading up to the finale?
I think, and there's a reason for why I'm going to say this, the main issues with the show are, at times, the writing and the pacing, which doesn't lend itself well, I don't think, to a weekly watch, as some episodes don't end in a cliffhanger that I think was going to grab an audience to kind of come back eagerly awaiting what's next, right? And while some of the action is exciting, the pacing of the second half of the series lends to nothing more than formulaic, fun entertainment that trusts you'll go along for the ride and leave all plausible deniability far away from the screen, whilst kind of bearing with a 2 steps forward, 1 step back approach to the show's 8-episode structure. So what I would do, I would watch the first 2 premiere episodes, see how you get along. Maybe you do want to do this weekly and you're happy that some episodes may not kind of deliver everything that you want within their 45 minutes. But if you are a binger and you do enjoy that, I would say binge. I binged Hijack a couple of years ago when we were talking about that, and I really enjoyed that experience. I think there is something similar to this, maybe not so high on the octane that Hijack has, but yeah, there's definitely a pacing element to this where I would binge, personally. The first 2 episodes of Prime Target debut today across all of your screens on Apple TV+. It's to be seen whether or not the sum of its parts make for good numbers, and whether this will be a fly under the radar and later appear on the best of end of year lists for 2025 kind of series. I'd be surprised, but then I've never been great at math, Devon.
Well, that's okay, Sigmund. You don't have to be great at math to enjoy Prime Target, which we'll be keeping up with as it continues its rollout on Apple TV+. Now, we're going to talk here in a little bit about a show I'm very excited to discuss with you, and that is Silo, with its second season. But that's going to be towards the end of the episode because it is going to be a spoilery discussion. But there has been some conversation, not about the plot of the show, but about the aesthetics of it throughout this season. And particularly, this is a conversation that I think we've heard before with other series, especially like prestige kind of series. I heard this said about Game of Thrones, and there's other shows that have had this conversation, but it has come to a head with Silo as well. And that has to do with the presentation of some of the scenes and how they manifest in different viewing scenarios and how that can impact people's viewing experiences. And it got to the point that I think even the series creator had to address it, right?
Yeah. So Graham Yost actually came out and talked about HDR and how dark some of the episodes are. And he says, I'm not going to defend it, it's just the way it plays. And sometimes stuff looks one way in a dark editing room. When we showed the first episode on a big screen in London, it looked fantastic because motion picture screens are very bright. So I just encourage everyone to crank up the brightness on their screens and you'll see a difference. And whilst I will agree, I have experience of the screen on which this premiere episode played at Picture House in Leicester Square. The screens are incredible there. And I almost wish they would say, for everyone to experience this the very best way, we're going to start doing theatrical runs of TV shows like Silo, so people can really experience it the best possible way, and tickets will be free, and that would be the perfect world that we live in. However, I've experienced it in my family home with HDR standards continually changing, screens getting brighter. We talked last week about CES and how certain screens that are coming are exceeding 4,000 nits of brightness. Incredible stuff. Does that continued expansion see audience left behind? Is that the harsh truth of modern day streaming and films? And is it something that maybe even can be improved in the pipeline from Apple? That if there was a way in which the Apple TV could know what screen it was connected to and then know what the limits are of the screen, not only would you have like HDR10 and 422 and all of the different options within audio and video on Apple TV, but there would be like another option that says, okay, you're connected to this screen, so we're going to adjust everything to better support the values of that particular screen. And maybe they'd need to partner up with LG, Samsung, Sony, Panasonic to be able to do that in some way. But I don't quite know how much crosstalk there is between the display going back to our Apple TV boxes. I will just say, like, we've got a smaller LG TV that's been moved to a bedroom now because it wasn't bright enough for the soaps for my grandmother to be able to watch it after her sight started to deteriorate. And so she needs the brightest LG TV in the living room really to be able to make out what's on the TV. And Apple Vision Pro she loved because she's never seen anything so bright, right? So there are benefits to the new advancements in hardware, but it does feel like there needs to be something there in the chain to kind of better help the audience that already have TVs and can't necessarily go out and buy one. One of the comments that I saw repeated from people was something that I guess kind of going back to a little bit of what we were talking about in our opening segment of this podcast. And that is this kind of societal behavior of, oh, well, if your TV's not bright enough, go out and buy a new one. Like, what are you complaining about? Doesn't quite work that way, right? So, yes, you can make the adjustments, but I also think we've got a couple of tips for how you can get the best from your big screen, and then we'll talk about the smaller screens in our lives.
Yeah, the thing that I thought of as I was reading Graham Yoss's comments about this situation and recommendations, first of all, turning up your brightness seems to me to indicate that he might be thinking about people watching on smaller screens rather than big screens, because adjusting your TV brightness is not something that people are going to be doing all the time. But also thinking about the theatrical experience, those rooms are specifically designed minus safety accommodations, which I always hate the exit signs, but I understand why they're there. But they're crafted in a way to maximize that experience, to take out any extra light that's going to distract from the screen. And that's a big reason why having your cell phone out in the movie theater is such a problem. It's not necessarily just that you're on your phone during a movie, but it's that light that's causing distraction and pulling the experience away. So it's not just the screen that you're using, although that is a big element. But for people who, aren't updating their TVs all the time, which is, I would say, is most people, a TV is something that you would keep for quite a while, and you just take advantage of whatever technology you can afford at the time that you buy your TV. But the environment is also important for getting the most out of whatever hardware that you're using. And this is something I've had to learn personally. I am someone who kind of detests artificial light in a lot of ways. There's this this trend now to kind of move away from overhead lighting and use more lamps and things like that. And that's very much my vibe. It's something I've done for a long time and have gotten made fun of at work for saying I work in a cave because I don't use my overhead light. But I also love natural light, and in my home, that's what we rely on as much of the time as we can. But then when you go to watch TV, if you've got these huge windows open in your living room with all this natural sunlight coming in, then your TV is completely washed out. And for some things that may not be the end of the world, but if you're trying to watch something like Silo, where the minute details of the color are so important and you're in these settings that are so dark, you really don't want any light shining directly on your screen that's going to pull away from that. So as much as you can control the environment, again, this is not something that, people are going to be able to spend a bunch of money on necessarily, but if you've got blinds or shades or curtains, if you've got the ability to dim your lamp or turn off an extra lamp or two in the scenario that you're watching, that's going to help quite a bit. Any ambient light, especially that is hitting directly on your screen, that is really going to get in the way of seeing anything dark. And so if that's something that you're struggling with, removing some of the ambient light, I think you're going to be able to see a lot more than you think you can, regardless of the TV hardware that you're working with.
I also think software-wise, if we were having this conversation like 20 years ago, this would have been something that would have been subject to only the highest end of TVs, right, and displays. But I'd say any TV that was purchased within the last 10 or 15 years has a filmmaker mode within it. And I know a lot of people, if you're just watching normal TV, it kind of dulls the screen a little bit more. That's going to put off a lot of people. But I promise you, if you choose that filmmaker mode for things like Silo and high-end feature films that are really taking the advantage of HDR, your TV is going to adjust scene by scene to getting the best picture out there. One kind of mistake that I know a lot of Samsung TV owners have is they'll use the out-of-the-box settings because they are the most vibrant and punchy, very much like a Samsung phone. You take a photo on a Samsung phone, it looks wonderful. You look at that photo on anything else and it looks god-awful. It was something that came to mind to me recently. I think over the Christmas period, there were a couple of YouTubers that had been allowed into Apple's labs where they're able to compare, for example, iPhone and iPad screens to what was being projected on like a Dolby Cinema screen. Really incredible stuff. We'll link to it in the show notes. There's a great conversation from Tyler Storman and Brian Tong on this experience as well, which we'll link to. But where it gets really interesting is whilst people are saying, hey, just go out and get a new TV, I think there's a couple of things that you can do there, like switching to filmmaker mode and drawing the curtains and this kind of thing. But also, maybe, and this isn't something I often say, and I think it's probably the first time I'm ever saying this, Devon, but maybe your phone or your iPad actually represents the best screen. Maybe even your iMac. You know, we laughed all those years ago now when the iMac was reintroduced and they were watching TV on their iMac in the kitchen. And they were like, how preposterous an idea that is. Well, actually, if this is your only screen and you're using it for entertainment as well, I think it offers a solid value in terms of the brightness, in terms of the reproduction of images.
Yeah, I'm looking at you on a 4.5K iMac right now, and the colors look fantastic. I won't lie, I've thought about using my iMac as like a bedroom TV. We don't have a TV in our bedroom. And so I do most of my viewing once Noah goes to bed on my iPad Pro, but I've thought about using the iMac as well. Personally, I watched the entirety of Silo Season 2 on my mini LED M1 iPad Pro, so not the latest tandem OLED version, but the mini LED that was introduced back in 2020. And I have to say, I honestly was completely clued out of this whole conversation because it just represented those colors so well. And I have confidence that my TV could have done well, again, if I had controlled the environment right, but it's not in a space where I can use it at night, once he's gone to bed. So that's just how I watched it. And like you said, I think that can be a good option for folks who may have a more modern, smaller device than their big TVs. Of course, we want to enjoy content on the biggest screen possible, but when you're trying to decide between some of those more nitty-gritty details in terms of the latest technologies, I mean, Apple packs some amazing screen technology into those devices at prices that really are incredible what you're buying compared to what's out there in the rest of the industry. And so that is a good recommendation. It's just a tricky situation all around, right? Because there's so many different players in the conversation. You've got people who have older TVs and aren't able or willing to upgrade. You've got people who are on the latest and greatest and want to take advantage of that and very well should be able to. And then you've got the creators who are excited about these new technologies and want to integrate it as quickly as possible, which, again, totally understandable. And you kind of almost need someone in the middle there to mitigate it and make sure that everyone is getting the best experience possible when they're watching their favorite shows. And I think Apple does a good job of handling that to the extent that they can with their devices. But again, I think there's always more that can be done, and hopefully the technology will continue to develop in a way that everyone will be able to take advantage of the best of those shows. Yeah,
I agree wholeheartedly. And I have a confession to make. On the launch weekend of Apple TV Plus, I was so desperate to check out the shows as soon as I could. I may have watched one episode of Dickinson whilst going around IKEA on my iPhone. So an iPhone's going to be a great screen as well. Maybe not for the shared experience, but with a pair of AirPods for spatial audio. And to be fair, the onboard speakers in a bathroom with the iPhone are incredible anyway. Yeah, I think there's plenty of options here, but I do hope that there's some kind of standardization and some kind of crosstalk in which hardware can then adapt its signal for knowing how bright a screen can get, not that it's just capable of HDR and 422 or 420. We talked about HDMI specs. There's a lot that could be tightened up within the tech world and home theatre and entertainment world in regard to that to make things more accessible. But then, hey, they wouldn't sell enough TVs, would they?
Well, that's the age-old question, how to sell more TVs. But of course we keep buying them, so maybe we're part of the problem, Sigmund. Well, we don't just watch Apple Originals on our TVs. We watch all kinds of things. And while we love the Apple TV app, there's another app that we also love quite a bit on our Apple TVs, and it got a big update this week. That, of course, is Plex, which announced a number of updates, including public profiles and reviews, HEVC encoding for all Plex Pass holders, and a public preview of the new Plex experience on Apple TV. Now, as of recording, test flight slots are available for that new experience on Apple TV. So hurry to the link in the show notes to secure your spot if you'd like to experience the new layout early. We talked about this when it came to the iPhone, and I honestly didn't think we'd see it on the Apple TV so quickly. So I'm really impressed that Plex have gotten this far. It really seems like they're putting a lot of energy into this, weekly updates, really trying to get feedback and adjust and make this the best experience possible before it goes public. Like I said, they opened up some more spots on that test flight. I was able to jump in. Sigmund, did you get a spot?
I
did. You get to try it out?
I did, and I checked it out. I love the new top navigation. I like how easy it is to find the live TV segment and on-demand segments that come direct from Plex. I normally adjust things so it only shows the content that I'm serving on my servers or my friends are serving on theirs. But with these new adjustments, I'm going to at least give these a go for a little while. I also love the kind of automatic, and I think this is being done through artificial intelligence, the grabbing of the different logos and the layout, very akin to what the TV app do with shows and films. So yeah, pretty impressed so far. I've only had like 5-10 minutes with it, but yeah, as a Plex user, I'm happy. That said, my kind of go-to right now and forever, I think, is going to be Infuse. But I do kind of dip between both.
Yeah, and that's totally fair, but I think it's great to have these tools available and have them be the best they can be. I think the Plex app looks fantastic, and my favorite part of it is how easy it is to get to your watch list. It's right up there next to your picture, and it's all right there. Of course, you know, I'm big on watch lists. I love curating them and using them as launchers, so no surprise that that's my favorite. But yeah, great work from Plex here. Continue to be keeping an eye on that as it gets closer and closer to a public release.
Yeah, no news yet on any kind of upgrades to the Vision Pro experience. Maybe that will come. But we do have some Vision Pro news in terms of apps. And this is an app that I didn't really see the need for, because there was a trailers app that I checked out not that long ago. Unfortunately, the trailers on that app just weren't getting updated as much as I wanted them to be. And as much as I love watching trailers, and I have nights where that's all I do, I just watch the trailers, especially in the drive-through on that particular app, because I've never experienced a drive-through in real life. We have a new trailer app from MoviePass, which, if I'm correct, Devon, this is a company that allows you to take out a subscription and then see as many films as you want at the cinema. And didn't this kind of disappear for a while and go bankrupt, and then it got taken over, and then there were new rules put in place, people were having difficulty logging in and getting their tickets? And what's this all about?
It's a very storied company. Let's just put it that way. They came out with this subscription service for movie theaters. We've talked before about, you know, how the movie theater experience is in need of some revamping, and this was one take on it. But people were suspicious of the finances behind it, because if you're paying $10 a month or whatever it is, and you're spending more than that in movie tickets, well, then how is MoviePass making money? So yeah, it went downhill, and things got rough for a minute. People were having trouble with, you know, canceling and refunds and all that stuff. But MoviePass is back in action now. I believe there's a limit. I don't remember exactly if it's 4 a month or it's some kind of, you know, limit like that. And there were lots of rules at one point around like which films you could see and which times. I think a lot of that's been kind of cleaned up. And also movie theaters have also tried this approach now too. And my local AMC was trying to get me to sign up at one point for their subscription, which I think it's a cool idea. But anyway, yeah, MoviePass, it's a company with an interesting history, but I think it's also the perfect company to be releasing an app like this, where there's kind of some connections between watching trailers and buying tickets and pushing you to kind of give their service a try if you're excited about a film. So let's talk about the app itself for just a second. It's called Screening Room. It's a free app for Apple Vision Pro that's dedicated to watching upcoming movie trailers in the best quality possible. I do have to say, I've watched a couple trailers in it. They do look better than watching them on YouTube in the Apple Vision Pro. I'd say probably equal quality to the TV app, which also, you know, has really, really high quality in terms of bitrate and getting the best quality videos. But I think we've had a discussion before that the trailer section of the Apple TV app isn't always the most updated either, right?
Yeah, especially when it comes to TV shows. And this is the thing, right? This is focusing on theatrical features. So I still think there's a gap in the market there for the TV show trailers for sure.
Well, we need a TV Pass company to come out and make an app for that, I guess.
One subscription for all of your TV subscriptions would be fantastic as well.
Oh, we might call it cable, Sigmund.
We might call it cable.
But for Apple TV fans, don't worry. MoviePass CEO Stacy Spikes told Engadget that the company plans to bring the app to Apple TV in the future. Seems like just a fun side project for the company that, they love movies. They are dedicated to that space. And I'd love to see this on my Apple TV as well.
Very, very cool. Here's a strange one, Devon. Canon this week. They've released a live streaming app for iPhone and iPad called Live Switcher Mobile that allows streamers to wirelessly connect up to 3 devices and switch between them as camera inputs in a live stream. The app also includes the ability to overlay text and graphics and connect directly to YouTube or Facebook, free to download, with a $17.99 per month subscription required to remove ads and watermarks. This is an interesting play. I did check out the trailer for this on YouTube. Surprising nobody, comments were turned off on that video because I think Canon camera users are kind of trying to predict where Canon are going after the R5 Mark II, because really Sony have kind of taken over the camera market, and I would say from a filmmaker's perspective, the new Blackmagic Pixis is pretty incredible too, and Lumix and their S5 2X and I think their GH7 are hot on the heels as well. Yeah, another option, very cool, but from someone I did not expect, Canon. And expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I could see where if you're a streamer for a living and you're trying to make your setup more mobile, I mean, maybe $18 a month is nothing, if that's your living. And that's probably the market that they're trying to appeal to. But it's an interesting company to be taking this on. And then it's part of a trend, I think, that started with Final Cut Pro for iPad, I think. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing more and more tools for wirelessly streaming and syncing up video between iPhones and iPads, which is very cool to see the technology get there. This one's interesting in that it's not just proxy video, it's actually the output is going to the source device. And so, I wonder what the quality is going to be like in practice once you get that going. When you're streaming to social media, maybe you don't have to worry quite as much about that. But yeah, this is definitely an interesting entry in this space and just another take on what companies are doing with this wireless connection between iPhones and iPads that has gotten so quick that you can just stream video instantly.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I was really surprised for this app to be launching without was RTMP support. So that, you could just put in the link that you need to fire off to any social media. This is literally Facebook and YouTube only. And at that price, and with the limit of 3 devices, it's a surprise to me. I don't actually think Canon have a app yet or software to do the same thing, but with their own cameras, which is a real surprise.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting decision, but I have to imagine at least a couple creators are going to try it out and get something out of it.
Now, Devon, talking of expensive apps.
Yeah, Sigmund, stop me if you've heard this story before. Netflix is increasing prices across its lineup of streaming plans in the US, Canada, Portugal, and Argentina, as announced in a letter to shareholders this week. The standard plan with ads is now going to be $7.99 a month, up from $6.99. The standard plan without ads is going to be $17.99 a month, up from $15.49. And the premium plan is going to be $24.99 per month, up from $22.99. That is an expensive streaming service, if you ask me, Sigmund. I mean, to get the full, 4K and the best quality. I mean, Netflix, it's a service I've been spending more time with lately. I talked about Squid Game, and there's some other things that I'm watching on there, but I mean, that's a hefty price to be paying. It's just that continued trend of price increases in the world of streaming. They just keep coming.
I mean, as a WWE fan, right, and as someone that lived through the days of pay-per-view and stuff, I'm not too concerned, because at least in Europe, whilst, premium live events still appear on Peacock in the US, everything is just coming, whether it's Raw or SmackDown or Saturday Night Main Event or Royal Rumble, which is coming up very soon. It's all on Netflix. So even with the price increase, it's kind of worth it to me for that one aspect, which is hilarious because I haven't checked out an original Netflix show or film in a couple of weeks since WWE joined the service. And I guess, how do you end this segment other than saying, in the immortal words of Hulk Hogan, what you gonna do, brother? Let's get into some trailer talk, Devon. 2 surprise trailers that dropped on the day that we're recording, a day later than usual, as you'll know if you're listening to this. Let's start with Vietnam, the War That Changed America. This is a 6-part docuseries commemorating the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon and the end of the Vietnam War, offering a deeply human look at the lives of those who lived through one of the most divisive conflicts in American history. Very interesting on, presidential inauguration year for this to release. It's coming from 72 Films, narrated by Ethan Hawke and directed by Rob Coldstream, produced by Caroline Marsden, who I think also has a documentary under her belt with regard to 9/11, One Day That Changed America. And this is also executive produced by David Glover and Mark Raphael, who were also behind Apple original docuseries John Lennon Murder Without a Trial, which was a highlight for me last year. Debuts very soon, Devon, on January 31st, so we're going to get more in depth on the series next week. But any initial thoughts on the trailer and the subject matter?
Well, the subject matter is obviously one that's very heavy over here, and with the 50th anniversary coming up, that's really not that long. There's so many people who fought in that war who are still alive and going to be featured in this docuseries, which is amazing. They're going to be getting perspectives from people on the Vietnam side as well, and featuring all kinds of original footage, which if you watch the trailer, that footage is just gut-wrenching. You can see recreations and pictures all the time, and sometimes it's easier to kind of separate that from the events, but when you're watching these real things happen in real time right in front of you, I mean, it's impactful. So this looks like an incredible assembly of that original footage with these interviews as well, and I think it's one that's going to be very powerful when we get to watch it next week.
Something coming a little bit later, something a little more light-hearted, Love You to Death, a new Spanish comedy dramedy, is that what we call them these days? Following a cautious Raul, following a heart cancer diagnosis, who reconnects with his free-spirited and newly pregnant Marta. They resume a friendship that began in childhood and in a relationship brought together by fate begin to test their beliefs about love. Can the commitment-phobic Marta fall in love, and can Raúl meet the love of his life?
¿Tengo cáncer?
Esto lo vamos a pasar juntos.
Que no me hacen quimio.
La he liado de locos.
¿Estás embarazada?
Mi vida no es como esperaba que sería a estas alturas.
El amor lo puedes encontrar en cualquier esquina.
Llevas toda la vida zurrándote películas románticas.
Tienes la posibilidad y vas a dejarla escapar.
Tienes que asustar al próximo que pase.
¿Qué haces? ¿Qué haces?
¡Es un fuego!
This is created and directed by Danny De La Orden, starring, and apologies if I'm butchering these names, Veronica Urchi and Juan Amargos. This was something that I watched and thought, okay, it's not breaking any barriers or anything in particular there, but this just looked like a really sweet dramedy that I'm looking forward to checking out, Devon.
Yeah, this one is a Spanish language series, which, I always applaud seeing series from other perspectives and languages on Apple TV Plus. I have to say this trailer made me laugh more than I think any trailer I've watched probably in the past year.
Oh.
And part of the humor of it is I don't speak Spanish fluently. I took a couple of years in high school, but there was just enough words that I could recognize that I would hear it right before I read it on the captions. And so I'd get the punchline twice and then I'd just start cracking up. And, you wouldn't think based on the premise, reading the press release that this is going to be as funny as it is. But to me, this looks like a straight up rom-com in series form. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It looks very romantic, funny. There's obviously going to be some heaviness with, when you're talking about these health situations. But this looks like it's going to be a fun time, that they're promising lots of laughs. I mean, that scene where his friend takes the razor to his head and starts shaving his head in solidarity, which is very sweet. But then he says, that's actually not the treatment that I'm going to be doing. That made me laugh very hard. So yeah, I think this is going to be fun. I was actually getting another series I haven't watched, but just kind of based on the trailer and the way people talk about it, I was kind of getting like Nobody Wants This vibes from this. I think this could hit kind of that same audience, which did great numbers for Netflix, very popular series. So yeah, I think this one's going to be a lot of fun and I'm looking forward to it.
I personally, I love the look of this. You can tell that there's great chemistry just from the trailer, not just from the two main characters, but from their families and friends. I think this is going to be one for the Apple original fans amongst us that were fans of Platonic. I think you're going to love this. But also, I would say for anyone that followed the romantic relationship between Dave and Ali in the early seasons of Fox's Dave, I think you're in for a treat on this one. And given that one of the characters, Raul, is a big rom-com fan, right, which is explicitly mentioned in the trailer, I think we're going to get some nods to some of the rom-com classics along the way as well. Love You to Death premieres globally with its first 2 of 7 episodes in just a couple of weeks, February 5th on Apple TV+.
Not long after that, on February 14th, all-new animated kids and family series Goldie is coming to Apple TV+. Created by Emily Brundage and based on her short film of the same name, the half-hour series follows Goldie, a giant girl with a big heart, as she sets off on epic adventures with her best friends in their beloved town of Boysenberg. Together, they learn that being different is something to celebrate, and that there's space for everyone in this world, even giants. The voice cast has me very excited. It includes Jessica McKenna, D. Bradley Baker, Amaria McCoy, Vendata Naidu, Gray Delisle, and James C., with guest appearances from Henley Winkler, Al Yankovic, Nicole Byer, Cree Summer, and more. A great group of people to get together for an animated series. This one, I don't think we've heard anything like rumors-wise about this one. I think it just kind of came out of the blue. No trailer yet, but we can look forward to it on February 14th.
Anything with Weird Al Yankovic, I'm 100% down for. Now, in production, it's been reported that Apple has cancelled the second season of The Completely Made Up Adventures of Dick Turpin midway through the filming process. In fact, 3/4 of the way through the filming process. Production began last fall and was set to resume following a holiday break, but series star Noel Fielding did not return to set, allegedly due to an illness. Rather than delay filming, the decision was made not to move forward with the series. Noel Fielding has yet to comment on the cancellation of The Completely Made Up Adventures of Dick Turpin, but has stated that he will be continuing as host of the Great British Baking Show. Now, Big Talk, which is the studio in conjunction with Apple that produced the show, they're having to deal with the repercussions of the cancellation. Again, 3/4 of the way through filming, with an undisclosed source of ours telling us that Big Talk and Apple are currently looking into how they could potentially move forward and expand the Completely Made Up Adventures series to other historical characters in the future. So that's good news. I'm really sad about this because there was quite a cast, including Jeremy Irons and Dawn French, that had already filmed their guest appearances for this series. And it just looks like, unfortunately, the second season of The Completely Made Up Adventures of Dick Turpin is just never going to see the light of day. And that is sad, because I thought this was a great opportunity for British comedy to really have a bit of a resurgence. You know, there was a little bit of Monty Python thrown in there, and it was a real pleasure to see during the first season, although, you know, I wasn't 100% on the story itself. I loved the fact that there was a platform for this.
Yeah, this is very sad to hear about, just especially for all the creative contributors involved, you know, not only in front of the camera, but behind the scenes, people who put so much work into this. Seems like one of those situations that just couldn't be avoided. It happens sometimes, unfortunately, with, you know, just things that come up and scheduling. But yeah, this is not something that I think we've really heard about with an Apple original so far, something just completely being scrapped in the middle of production like this, at least not in recent memory. It's not something that I'm used to covering anyway. And yeah, it's unfortunate, and our hearts go out to all those affected.
Yeah, very much so. When Apple TV Plus began and all of the executives were getting ready, I don't think anyone could have had on their bingo card how many different things have happened to the originals in this short space of time. You know, what we're talking, barely 5 years in. We've had cancellations 3/4 of the way through. We've had delays due to court injunctions with The Banker, for example. We've had a pandemic, strikes, both writers and actors strikes. Literally, I can't think of another thing that could happen to an Apple original that hasn't already happened. So at least I think Apple are at least prepared now for anything.
Yeah, let's not tempt anything, but welcome to the industry, Apple. Welcome to making shows and films in the midst of everything happening in the world. And the fact that we have the quality and output that we do on Apple TV Plus, I think speaks to the pipeline and the amazing creatives that are behind all that planning and doing such a great job. Now, you mentioned the legal situation with The Banker and how that held up that film, which I think was kind of thought to be Apple's first award-worthy contender, and ended up missing award season because of that. Well, there's another Apple original that is now finding itself in a court battle. The jury trial has begun for Francesca Gregorini's $81 million lawsuit against Apple and the creators of Servant over alleged similarities between the series and Gregorini's 2013 independent film, The Truth About Emmanuel, with series creator Tony Bascallop, director M. Night Shyamalan, and producer Taylor Latham, as well as Apple TV Plus programming head Matt Chernus, all in attendance in court. We'll link to a Variety report with all the details, but the case hinges on the question of whether or not the show's creators were aware of and drew inspiration from Gregorini's film about a delusional mother caring for a doll in place of a baby and her nanny who takes part in the delusion. The trial, which kicked off with the jury watching both The Truth About Emmanuel and the first 3 episodes of Servant, is expected to last 2 weeks. Now, jury duty is a thing here in the U.S. I've been called once. I ended up not being able to go because of a work trip, and I haven't been called since. But I hope if I ever get called for jury duty again that I get to watch TV as a part of it. That sounds like a pretty good deal.
I mean, as part of being called for a jury like that, are you not allowed to be a subscriber to Apple TV Plus? How does that work?
Yeah, I've already seen this one. I do a podcast about it. I've probably got a conflict of interest. Don't put me on this jury. We joke, but seriously, this is a very unfortunate and serious situation in terms of creative ideas that they exist in the world, and nothing comes from out of nowhere, right? But the question of someone's idea just being completely ripped off, they're going to argue about whether or not the creative team even saw the film before Servant was created. And I'm not qualified to make any claims about who's right and who's wrong, but it is a very interesting situation. It's sad that things have to be settled in this way, but it sounds like if the trial's only going to take a couple of weeks, we may have some kind of decision before too long that we can cover here on the show as well.
Yeah, the film in question is actually in the TV app. still. So if we can, we'll link to it in the show notes. I got to check it out. There were some similarities, but I think as expansive as the story is of Servant, which is still one of my favourite Apple originals, the similarities stop pretty quickly. Now, in terms of favourite Apple originals and what those Apple originals do with regard to Apple TV Plus and how the service, especially in the US, is seen in terms of financial success, we got some really interesting news from Parrot Analytics, who've put out some interesting research quantifying how much revenue Apple original series have generated for the company over time. I don't think they equate what the budgets were for those series, and we can get into that in a little bit, but we've got a little bit of a rundown and some familiar names amongst these. No little voice on this list, unfortunately.
Yeah, it didn't quite register on the radar for this particular list. It starts with Severance. That's kind of the background for why this conversation is being had. Parrot talks about Severance generating over $200 million in revenue, with half of that revenue coming from rewatches and catch-ups in the 12 months following its release. So kind of the way it caught on to people and got them coming back to watch it even after its initial run. Slow Horses with $185 million, which is pretty impressive. The Morning Show, $299 million, a really big player there. And then Ted Lasso coming in with $609 million in revenue estimated over its lifetime, which that is a lot of money and really powerful effect, I think, of that particular original on the service and just what kind of audience it can draw. I think what Parrot is trying to do here, and we don't know their methods, they're proprietary, that's kind of a huge part of their business. They dole out little bits of this information to try to draw in clients, of course, but it gives us plenty of things to talk about. They're trying to equate signups with particular originals, try to figure out why people sign up for the service and how much money is being accrued by those particular subscribers over time. And so, Apple doesn't release these numbers. It's nearly impossible to actually put a number on how much money a show brings in, because it's like, okay, did they sign up 100% for Ted Lasso? Was it 95% for Ted Lasso? And when they sign up for Ted Lasso, then they stick around for other things, right? That's kind of the whole thing. You have these entry points, and then you try to keep it going, ongoing. But it's interesting just to have these estimates about how these shows are doing. It's great to see. I think Slow Horses is the big surprise for me on this list, just how well it's doing. But I mean, it is one of Apple's most prestigious and popular shows and has a lot of episodes for people to catch up on. And then Severance doing so well with just its first season, and especially bringing in people after the fact, I think is great. Parrot also mentioned that based on demand, Severance could be set up for what they call a breakout sequel season, which I think bodes very well for Severance, and I think lines up very well with the conversation that we've been seeing. Everyone's so excited to see it coming in. It's a great time to be an Apple TV Plus subscriber, and based on these numbers, it seems like the originals are bringing in quite a bit of money.
Very, very cool. Some prestigious titles in that list. And the prestige continues with this week's dip into Apple FYC. Of course, lots of awards nominations ongoing, all the way up leading up to the Oscars in just a few months' time. Let's start with the Rotten Tomato Awards. Yes, Rotten Tomato, not tomato. I mean, we could sing the song, but let's not. Slow Horses, Best Returning Series, and the 23rd Annual Visual Effects Society Awards nominations for Blitz for Outstanding Supporting Visual Effects in a Photoreal Feature, with the winner of that being announced on February 11th.
The Producers Guild of America Award nominations are also out. Bad Sisters was nominated for Episodic Television and Drama, as was Slow Horses. Steve Martin, a documentary in 2 parts, was nominated for Nonfiction Television. Fraggle Rock, Back to the Rock, nominated for Children's Program. Messi's World Cup for Sports Program. And, not necessarily an Apple original, but one that Apple did have a hand in, What If an Immersive Story was nominated for the PGA Innovation Award. Those winners will be announced on February 8th. Congratulations to all the nominees and best of luck.
Writers Guild of America nominations. There's 3 for Apple Originals, beginning with Presumed Innocent for limited series, Sugar for episodic drama, and Fraggle Rock Back to the Rock for children's episodic long form and specials, with winners announced on February 15th. And one day after that is, of course, the BAFTA Awards, with 3 nominations going to Blitz for Outstanding British Film, Costume Design, and Sound, with winners announced February 16th, streaming on BBC iPlayer and internationally.
Very cool. Well, we love to see love for Apple Originals in the nominations, and we wish them all the best of luck as those awards are announced and as we continue to stream towards the Oscars. Now it's time to talk about this week's Apple TV releases. Yesterday saw the premiere of Prime Target. Tomorrow we have a new episode of Severance. And you have a little bit of a tidbit of what we can expect with that, right?
Yeah. So as disturbing as the intro was in the first season with all that crazy animation, what I'm hearing is there's a new season intro this season to look forward to, which is even more disturbing. So yeah, looking forward to the second episode of Severance. Of course, for all of our discussion and theories after the first episode, you can check those out on a special episode of Magic Razor Flight that released last week. And also, you know, there were a couple of tidbits that we weren't able to mention because they hadn't been revealed. Keanu Reeves with a guest spot as the Lumen Industries building, talking during that animation portion, which is very, very cool. And I hear it now, I know, but I had no clue watching it the 2 times that I did before we recorded.
Yeah, I was trying to guess whose voice that was. I didn't think to check the credits, but they joked about it on the Severance podcast that they brought someone in for that. I thought they were trying to imply that Ben Stiller himself had done it, but the fact that they brought Keanu Reeves in, that makes so much more sense. And yeah, he did an excellent job portraying the Lumen building in Severance.
One other tidbit from the season premiere as well was the technology that was used to film that opening sequence, filmed on a Sony FX3, which is, you know, like a $3,000 camera that most people, I'd say, you know, that are into cameras can afford. Been around for a few years now, used on the Creator. Of course, it's being paired with Panavision lenses, which are tens of thousands of dollars of expense. But yeah, just interesting to hear, you know, that I think that sequence took 5 weeks to shoot, which is incredible, and was shot on, say, Sony's Burano, which is their latest cinema camera, and a cheaper camera than their like industry standard Venice cameras, and the Sony FX3. So very, very cool.
Tomorrow also sees the premiere of Ava the Owlet Season 2. So a great lineup of Apple Original releases this week for all ages. We've got lots of extras this week as well. We'll start with the Severance ones. Ben Stiller and Adam Scott appeared on Apple News in Conversation to talk about the second season of Severance. You can listen to that in the Apple News app, and we'll link to it as well. Also for Severance, there was a behind-the-scenes video inside the Grand Central Terminal pop-up, an incredible piece of marketing where the MDR team themselves went inside this giant glass cube and were working for 3 hours straight in character as people watched them. Incredible to see the cast do that. That is commitment to marketing your show. It shows how much they love Severance and want people to see it, and it really got a lot of conversation going. If you want your own Mark S. style blue balloon, if you were jealous seeing his face on all of those in the Season 2 premiere, you can create your own Severance style balloon image at severanceballoon.com. I did it with one of my pictures. It's pretty fun. It's a little jarring to see your face on a balloon, but you know, it's fun. And finally, for Severance, we have the Season 1 recap, courtesy of Lumen, of course, featuring Keanu Reeves himself. For fans of Silo, you might have heard that there was a suited Silo citizen in attendance at last week's Dallas Mavericks game. There were some really fun photos of that, and again, just a fun way to market the show and get some buzz around it. There's also a fun video that we'll link in the show notes to Inside Solo's Vault with Steve Zahn, where he gives you a tour of everything happening inside that vault. There's a lot of stuff in there. Really cool place. Finally, for extras, we love to highlight videos and shows and films that are shot on iPhone. And OK Go has come out with a new music video for their song A Stone Only Rolls Downhill. This video was not only shot on iPhone, but they used 64 iPhones in a grid coordinated with these one-shot takes to tell this whole story and do all these different amazing effects that are coordinated across all these phones. It's really a feat. I mean, OK Go, they've been doing these really unique music videos for decades now. I think the first one was on a treadmill or a series of treadmills, I believe. That's the first one I saw. But they just always have to up the ante, and this one shows off the videography on the iPhone, but also, I guess, what you can do if you really, really try hard to sync things up and film things with your phone.
Well, that is a long list of extras, along with some incredible Apple original releases. And don't forget all of the Apple Arcade games out there that you have yet to catch up on as well. So lots to do over the next week. But it is time for a spoiler recap of Silo's sophomore season. Spoilers normally only have one tier. This season has a couple of tiers because Silo is based on a series of books which I've listened to. So I'm going to be very, very careful as to what I say in this conversation. But first, a recap of the series. Of course, Silo, the story of the last 10,000 people on Earth, their mile-deep home protecting them from the toxic and deadly world outside. However, no one knows when or why the silo was built, and those who try to find out face fatal consequences. If the lies don't kill you, the truth will.
What if everything you know to be true was just one big lie?
She might be out there somewhere. Still alive.
I need to know what happened here. For my friends, my family.
People are saying it's time for a rebellion. I'm not afraid of the rebellion. I'm more afraid of what she saw.
Created and showrun by Graham Yost, starring Rebecca Ferguson, Tim Robbins, Common, Harriet Walter, Shaneza Uche, Avi Nash, Alexandria Riley, Shane McRae, Remy Milner, Claire Perkins, Billy Post-Forthwaite, Rick Gomez, Caitlin Zoss, Tanya Moody, and Ian Glenn, with a new addition this season in Steve Zahn. And let me just say, a remarkable performance from Steve Zahn. To start off, Devon, what are your overall initial thoughts on Silo's sophomore season?
I really enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of world building, and this very much is still a world that feels like it's being unveiled to us. That's the part that I enjoy most about Silo. There's so much about the Silo that we don't know, but the show does a great job of slowly doling out answers at just the right time. That's a very delicate balance of keeping you satisfied while also keeping you guessing. I think they do a great job there. I just love spending time in the silo with these people. You know, it's dark, it's dreary, it's kind of wet sometimes. It's not the happiest place in the world, but I look forward to pressing play and going down to the silo every week, and I've loved this ride for the second season. How about you?
I mean, as we experienced, it gets hot sometimes as well. We'll get there. The second act of 4 is always a difficult thing to pull off, I think, for a TV series. I know some of my friends dropped off and decided to binge the last 4 remaining episodes, which is understandable, but having read the books, and yes, there are slight changes in the screen adaptation to the books, I knew about the potential payoff, and so I stuck with it. For that reason, and in order for me not to divulge, I'm going to repeat what I said before our little clip. I'm going to be very, very careful in what I say. So, 2 tiers of spoilers for this series, and we are not going to go into tier 2. Or should it be level 2? I don't know. We have that kind of level class system. We should probably bring it to our spoilers as well for Silo.
So level 2's below level 1. You have to go downstairs to get to it, right?
Absolutely. A lot of the conversation about this season revolved around pacing and the fact that the plot is essentially split between two settings. Silo 18, where Juliet is from, and Silo 17, the seemingly abandoned silo that she stumbles upon. What did you think of this structure and its effect on the show's pace?
I wasn't bothered by it at all, honestly. I think it was kind of cool to take the show in a different direction. You know, we spent season 1 entirely in one place, so it was kind of refreshing to split it between two, even though they looked, you know, mostly identical. Obviously, Silo 17 has seen some stuff that Silo 18 hasn't yet. But yeah, I thought it was great the way they pulled it off. There were moments when I noticed that the show was purposefully tipping the scale towards one storyline over the other. You know, the first episode we spent entirely in Silo 18 with Juliet, whereas there were a couple episodes where we hardly saw her at all because most of the action was taking place in Silo 17. I never really got bothered by that or wished to be somewhere else. I thought they balanced it all, paced it all out very well. You know, it's understandable that this season is covering, the last third of the book or so. So it's not got as much source material to draw on, so it's not going to move quite as quickly. But honestly, I thought in terms of taking some time to spend with these characters, really get into their heads, and also, again, really dig deep into the world, I loved it. I thought it balanced and interweaved the various storylines very well. I thought they pulled it off great. Did you feel the same way?
I did. I mean, in order to explore one of the show's main themes, you know, class warfare and the exploitation that comes with that, you know, we're seeing the consequences of those themes in real time, where we're seeing these people and the characters within those groups living within the aftermath of a mismanaged and corrupt system that's collapsed the society as it was once known. I think the juxtaposition between the two stories show how the class system within the silo, based on its levels, is forever doomed to be repeated because of what we see in terms of the aftermath of, I'm guessing, another failed silo in the silo which Juliet is in, and where she finds Steve Zahn's solo.
It's funny you frame it that way, because there's like two devolutions of society, right? There's what actually creates the silo. We know something terrible has happened out in the outer world to where they're driven underground. But then even once they're underground, that society we know can fall and just disintegrate into nothingness. And we really see that with Silo 18, which, it's kind of devastating to think about, but that's kind of where we start the season. And it makes you when we go back to Silo 17, where Juliet came from, it really helps you understand the stakes of what's going to happen here if things don't change. And so, yeah, I personally think that the way they split it up, it doesn't slow things down or mess up the pace. I think it actually ups the stakes for what's happening. It really gives context for this potential rebellion that's been brewing in Silo 17.
Yeah, foreboding for sure, right? Now, thinking about Juliet's journey in this season, she's very focused on getting home to try to prevent a catastrophe at her silo, similar to what happened at the one she stumbles upon. At the same time, she's having to manage her relationship with this very unpredictable guy she's met named Solo. What stood out to you most about her experience this season? And also, were you surprised come the finale of that bait and switch where we don't know where Solo is and where her suit may be? And in fact, you know, after all of this tension between the two characters, where, you know, he shows how kind of scared he is, he ends up testing this suit to make sure it's airtight. I just thought that was a fantastic turn in that final episode.
That was a really sweet moment, and honestly, by that point in the season, I was no longer worried about their relationship. I felt like they had established that rapport. I think the moment that I was questioning it was actually a couple episodes earlier when Juliet's underwater and the rope is cut. And we don't see Solo's perspective on that for quite some time. And so when she first comes out, the question is, did something happen to him, or did he just abandon her? He got what he needed and he took off because, he was trying to get her to turn on the water pumps so that he could survive in his silo. Well, once she did that, that's when he seemingly abandoned her. Once it was established that he hadn't abandoned her in that moment, I thought their relationship was pretty secured, and you could even see that in the way that she tries to save his life and help him kind of work through some of his things. In terms of Juliet herself, though, we started with the engineer, where we see her strength and what she's capable of on her own. And she's just so impressive. And I mean, Rebecca Ferguson, to carry that entire episode yourself, I mean, she's the only person who appears throughout most of that episode. And the things that she does and her attitude throughout it and just her persistence. If I were put in that situation, even if I had the tape, if I were sent out to a desolate world with, nothing but 10 minutes of oxygen or whatever in this thin suit, I would not have made it. But her persistence is what really drives her to survive. That's stuck with me since that first episode. I think it's just incredible what she did there.
I thought, we've often talked about how the world building in these shows is very much a character in itself. This was that, wasn't it? That first episode was Juliet and the character of the silo. And I thought that was really just so well done. I think we talked about it, when we previewed the episode, but, just in case we don't get to it, the architecture that's involved, the set pieces, just all of the thought behind the scenes to create this world, that I thought really showcased it in a way that's rare for a show to really exploit.
For sure. And in hindsight, that breaking of the bridge between IT and the rest of the silo is kind of foreshadowing of what's going to happen in Silo 17, when the real turning point in the rebellion is the destruction of the stairs, because you're suddenly cut off from the rest of society, right? That's really, in that scenario with that architecture, that really is the breaking point for so many people. So yeah, I thought that whole thing tied together so well. And like you said, it speaks to the thought that goes into the world building and the architecture, and how the silo itself really is such a big player in the show. Beyond Juliet's mental capabilities, though, we see her navigate this very tricky social situation that she's in with Solo, who seems to be a friend one second and then a threat the next. So Juliet's not only a survivor, but she becomes a leader throughout this season, I think, who sees through the surface and inspires others to overcome seemingly impossible situations. She stumbles upon this other silo that she didn't know existed. She persists through that. She has to navigate this relationship with Solo, who, has been locked in this room alone since he was a child, and still is very much in that kind of childish mindset of, the rules and trying to follow the rules, and just very erratic behavior, I would say. And we see her in season 1, I think, struggle with the social dynamics of things. She's just very blunt with people and tells it like it is, and maybe doesn't necessarily try to see things from other people's perspective. And in season 2, she's in this scenario where with Solo, she needs him to survive. They need each other, really. And she figures out how to make that work in a way that, I think it's just so impressive. I find her so inspiring and respectable. And I think it's actually her social intelligence this season that stuck out to me. I think that progression of her as a character, what she learns in Silo 18 when she goes back to 17, I think is really going to help her in terms of working with other people.
Back in the silo, tensions are mounting between the Mayor Bernard and the team in Mechanical. There's violence, there's sabotage, there's intrigue at every turn, and it's hard to predict whose loyalty will land where. And I think, actually, thinking about this, loyalty is a big subject within this, whether we're talking about Bernard Holland, whether we're talking about Sims and his wife, right up until the end there as well. Even the power dynamics that are at play between Lucas, who knows about this foreboding future, when he's really played the pauper in comparison to Sims, who's always really had something over him. Did you see the devolving of the social order as an inevitable fate or something that could potentially be salvaged? And did you see some of these other kind of power shifts happening throughout the season?
Yeah, it's amazing how there's so much political jockeying going on in the season. You know, Sims tries to make a move to try to get more power, and then he gets sidelined as the judge, which you think is his powerful position, but it's really not. And then you see him almost kind of on the fence between whether he's going to go with the establishment or the rebellion. And his wife is really the driving force behind that. She really took center stage in a lot of ways this season. We learned a lot about her, and I thought she did a great job. We've seen a very similar scenario play out now in Silo 18. We know how that ended. We see Juliet having to climb over the bodies as she's trying to find refuge in this abandoned silo. And I think what we're led to believe is that this is almost like designed to happen or inevitable. You lock these people underground for long enough. There's a playbook that the mayor's supposed to be following that the founders gave to try to quell rebellion, but it almost seems to make things worse. And you get this sense that they think of the founders as all-knowing and being prepared for everything, and then they suddenly end up in a situation, it seems like always with Mechanical, where things just take a turn, and it just can't be salvaged. I think the thing that I think is going to be different for Silo 17, at least I hope so, that this is the direction that the series is going, is Juliet herself. She's the one, I think, that could save them from this fate. This seems inevitable given the awful situation that these people have been put in. As you said before, the class dynamics in the silo, again, they're almost set up to ignite this rebellion. If anyone can enact change and create a more equitable society and leave these people to live in peace, I think it's going to be Juliet. So without her return, yeah, I think that rebellion was headed straight the way that Silo 18 was going. But the fact that she made it back, that she hopefully is going to make it inside after the way, her storyline ended with her literally facing the fire. I hope that her status as a symbol and this power vacuum that's now being created within the silo, that she's able to, establish some kind of peace and justice. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. I don't think it's inevitable, but it's hard to overcome.
We've talked a little bit about Juliet. We've kind of touched on Tim Robbins, Bernard Holland, but I kind of want to go back for a moment because of the shift in power dynamics, even away from him, which I think's the really interesting part, especially in this finale, as things play out in the silo. We learn about the secrets of the world and how it's really run. The algorithm. I was just wondering if you had any theories on what's truly going on based on what we've seen so far and what that might be saying, in terms of, we talked about class war and class dynamics, but, Silo is also trying to say something about artificial intelligence and technology and the way we're going in many different ways, right? Solo, and I guess like the internet and untruths and who to trust, which we're going to get to right at the end of the finale and the big twist. But yeah, do you have any theories? And first off, what did you think of that kind of twist with the algorithm taking all of the power in the end?
I thought that whole storyline with Lucas Kyle was just incredible. Seeing him go from, this stargazer who gets arrested for kind of being in the wrong place at the wrong time to figuring out some of the deepest, darkest secrets of the silo and being one of the few people throughout its entire history to meet the algorithm, which, by the way, isn't mentioned by name. You have to look at the captions to actually know what that is. And so I had a lot of theories about who he was speaking to before I kind of saw the online commentary about, okay, so that's this character's name according to the captions. That's actually in the series itself, that this is some entity referred to as the algorithm that Lucas speaks to and just shakes him absolutely to his core. So I thought that whole storyline was absolutely intriguing. Again, it's part of the world building that I really love about this show. And I think Lucas was the perfect vehicle to to get us there. In terms of what's actually happening, I've avoided spoilers. I know the books are out there. I just want to watch the series and be surprised, though. I hope I can make it through 2 more seasons without having it spoiled. But, there's these questions about, okay, so who are the founders? What inspired them to build this silo? What were their motivations? But in terms of what's happening with the algorithm and the safeguard procedure, which seems to be activated or nearly activated at the end of the season, I don't know. I can't tell. Are these different silos? Are they experiments? Like, is each one slightly different that they're trying to figure out a way to rebuild society on some part of the earth that's not been damaged? Or are they going to try to take people to a different planet? I mean, that's another thing that gets floated out in the real world as well. Are they prepping to take a society to Mars? Does the silo have rockets underneath it? I don't know. It's a struggle for me to fully predict. I just know that I'm tempted to read the books and find out, but I just want to wait and see how it plays out on screen. So I'm sure I'm way off base. You already know. Lots of our listeners already know. I'm sure you're yelling at your car speakers right now that I'm way off base. But I'm just going to continue to stay in the dark and wait and see what happens. That's my plan.
Okay, I can say something now.
Yeah, you had to be quiet for that question.
I really did. I really had to bite my lip. I think this has been a great series. I'm really happy with how everything panned out. I will say, though, the big twist, right? And it's something we can talk about now. Of course, there is going to be a dramatic change in the style of the show going forward, and the presentation, I would imagine as well. A little bit more light as we delve into the next level of this show and this story. Let's talk about the final scene of the season finale, which comes in out of the blue right as Juliet and Bernard are on the verge of being engulfed in fire. The show takes us back hundreds of years to a world much like our own, where a congressman named Daniel, played by Ashley Zuckerman, and a reporter named Helen, played by Jessica Henwick, have a conversation over dinner about the lingering effects of a dirty bomb and potential responsive measures against Iran. What was your reaction to this sudden shift in the story setting? And I'll be honest, I didn't know whether or not they were going to do this in the finale or if they were going to wait until the next season. And then I was thinking, wow, they're going to really have to rush the story through the next 2 seasons. But thankfully, we got this surprise. I have some details that I can share without getting into spoiler territory. But did that melt your brain, or?
Oh, absolutely. My jaw was on the floor when we transitioned from the silo to a modern day DC street. It felt like we had switched shows. I think someone said, I think I sat on the remote or something like that. That's kind of, that feeling that you get. I was so intrigued because there were so many tidbits about what happened to the world before the silo. It was an amazing tone shift, I think, from the cliffhanger to leave us wondering, kind of suspend that tension and leave us there, while offering the tiniest bit of explanation and then bringing up even more questions that we're going to no doubt be discussing for months as we wait for season 3's release. So I thought it was a genius way to end the season. Again, it's this delicate balance of keeping people satisfied while also keeping people on the hook. And I don't know a lot of shows that could have pulled this off, this just huge, sudden, complete change in setting and tone, without feeling like a totally different show. But somehow this series, it makes sense. I can't wait to see more and see what they're going to do with this. But yeah, it was just that perfect little bit of taste. I'm so glad they included it so that now we know what to expect going into season 3, that we're going to be spending some time with this congressman and the reporter and all these people in this world. And yeah, I'm just so excited. I thought it was really, really excellent.
Okay. I'm not going to give too many thoughts. I'm just going to put what I've written down because I've kind of self-edited myself, okay, on this final scene. Daniel is the congressman of Georgia's 15th district, but Georgia only has 14, so what's going on there? DC seems to be on high alert, but was this a false flag attack on DC to kind of, pin on Iran. And this new thing, the Geiger machine that detects radioactive particles, it may always flash green, as the congressman asks before he's going into the bar, does this thing ever flash red when being swiped? And the person says, no, I don't think so, or something along those lines. And so I wonder how conspiratorial this is, and I think this is very much a show of conspiracies. I did think it was very interesting also that, the conversations that's being had are between two people that we are taught to trust, right? A politician who we're supposed to trust and a journalist who we're supposed to trust. And yet the conversations that they're having between each other kind of hint that we shouldn't trust either. And, even simple things like the Pez dispenser, right? That is just there, I think, as a memento for the first time that they met. That's as far as I'm going to go there. But it's going to be interesting to see where their stories continue. Georgia also seems to be the skyline that's behind where, we get the outside shots of the silo. And there's 50 silos. So is that a silo representing each state? And are they trying to recreate another United States of America within these silos? They're just thoughts of mine that I wanted to kind of pen and remark upon, maybe get you to comment on.
Well, I hadn't thought about the connection between 50 silos and 50 states. They seem to be close together, or at least you can walk between a couple of them. I guess we don't know exactly where all of them are, but yeah, that's an interesting theory. I really want to know more about the Duck Pez dispenser, just because, how does it end up becoming the relic that it is? And, it ends up in the silo somehow. So I love that as just a little Easter egg. But I didn't have the same conspiratorial thoughts that you did. I guess my mind just didn't go there watching that scene. I was just too in awe. I need to rewatch it and find out if I'm going to trust these people or not. But we will be spending more time with them. They're going to be season regulars next season, which is very exciting. So with season 2 of Silo behind us, we have 2 more seasons to look forward to, one of which is filming now and the other of which has already been written, with plans to film it immediately after season 3. So is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to seeing in the show's second half?
Bernard's downfall, and I guess whether or not he survives. Also, furthermore, the algorithm and it being in charge, and the power dynamics within, and who's in control of the algorithm, or is the algorithm just completely sentient? How AI becomes the show's antagonist going forward, Steve Zahn's solo and the continued commentary on his isolation. And maybe I'm looking too deeply into it, but the social commentary on social media and those that live and play out their lives on the internet, I think there's going to be more along those lines, and from a conspiracy point of view as well. Also, and I can't remember from the book, so I'm just going to put it out there, but Solo's mum is mentioned a couple of times in the series, and we think maybe she's part of the judicial, but we don't know. Is his mum still alive? And if so, where is she and what is she doing? That's what I'm looking forward to finding out and seeing how it's revealed on screen, if it is at all, because there are some changes compared to the books.
Yeah, for sure. Some great questions. I think what I'm looking forward to most is seeing Juliet reunited with the people that she cares about in her silo. She's got some unfortunate news that she's going to find out. They've lost some people who are close to her, but I am excited to see her return. I think if anyone has the ability to enact change there, it's going to be her. I'm also really excited to hear that Steve Zahn's coming back as Solo, and that he will be sticking around. I don't know exactly how he's going to tie into the plot going forward, but I'm happy to know that he's going to be around. I think we're going to have to wait for the flashback timeline to start to develop more before we get any real answers about the safeguard and who's behind it and how it all works, as well as the purpose of the silo itself. I think that's going to be kind of slowly revealed throughout that flashback. So I think it's going to be a slow rollout of answers, but I'm fully invested and excited for the ride, because after 2 seasons with these folks, I trust the show's creators to stick the landing with the next 2 seasons, and I really just can't wait to see what they do with it.
Yeah, well, Silo, the first 2 seasons now streaming on Apple TV Plus, with 2 more seasons on the way. But for everyone that has caught up already on Silo and looking for some other titles to check out on the TV app this week, I've got a few highlights for you. Again, all film highlights. I'm just going to rattle off the names because I think the majority of them need no introduction. Sonic 3 on PVOD, alongside Gladiator 2, which is on Paramount Plus and MGM Plus this weekend, and a film that I never got to see in the theatre, so we'll be checking out at my first opportunity this week, is Nosferatu on PVOD. I know this was the one that you said you wanted to avoid like the plague, but I've heard very, very good things in terms of cinematography and just the overall ambience of this. And I think you'll have a blast. So my mission is to convince you otherwise, Devon. On Friday, we've got The Wild Robot on Peacock and The Girl with the Needle on Mubi, a new independent film that I've heard only good things about. Followed on Saturday by Saturday Night, which is the foundational story dramatised of Saturday Night Live, the longest running, I think, weekly show on American TV, at least in terms of the entertainment category. On Saturday also, Kobe, The Making of a Legend on CNN. It's a CNN original. I'm not too sure where you'll be able to check that out in your local area, but definitely look it up. That's definitely a highlight on the streaming releases this week. And we've got some up next picks for you, but it's time, finally, to talk about an up next pick that you picked for me, Devon.
Yeah, as our annual Christmas tradition goes, I assigned you a film to watch over the holiday break and bring back to the show to review. And that film was Believe Me. This is an older independent film, but it's one that I watched when it first came out and really stuck with me. So I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this. What'd you think about Believe Me?
Well, it was a film which is a step above the Taylor Swift concert from last year that was picked for me. And that was 3 hours long, was it? Yeah.
Yep.
This is 90 minutes long, and Believe Me is about a college student played by Alex Russell and his roommate who start a fake charity and scam gullible churchgoers into paying their tuition. Now, this is something that's very alien to me as someone that didn't go to university, I think called college over on that side of the pond. And so I really know nothing about like university or college fees and how that whole world works. I just know that it's really expensive and the value in some circumstances is questionable, to say the least. In this story, the main protagonist finds out that his scholarship has expired and he owes $9,000 in order for him to graduate, which is, again, it's just a crazy world we live in because it's all loans here. And, you know, you wouldn't have a blockade on you from being able to progress in life, which is just, again, it's just absolutely crazy to me. What this person decides to do is he sees all of these churches raising money for different causes and decides to start a missionary for African children. And whilst doing a good deed, he and his friends are skimming off the top to pay off their tuition. Right, that's the plan. And I gotta say, I didn't really enjoy the film to the degree that I was hoping to. And that's weird because this is basically, in a lot of ways, that thing you do. The classic music film. Have you seen that film, That Thing You Do? Oh my God. Devon, you disappoint me.
So sorry.
It's a classic comedy musical about a pop rock band who were recruited by Tom Hanks, who directed that film but also stars as like this agent that comes on board, right? You have this same kind of dynamic happening before certain people start to realize that this is getting too big and this is so wrong. It's a film that honestly, I'm sure there is some good here, but for me, like, I saw it as horrible people doing horrible things with little to no consequence at the end. I thought the acting was kind of subpar. This is, however, the first narrative movie for the director Will Backey, who I believe had some success in, I think, like 2021 with his next narrative film. So there was quite a gap between the two. I wouldn't say there wasn't any entertainment value here. There definitely was some, and I really enjoyed initially the kind of comedic premise, but then it kind of takes a bit of a turn and gets very, very dramatic, to which point I just kind of turned off because I didn't really like any of the people involved. And I'm sorry, Devon, like I don't mean to be the kid who feels like he got left a lump of coal for Christmas. But I kind of do.
That's okay. You know, not every film is for everybody. You know, this was one that, you know, I think it came to me at a time in life when I needed the film's message, which is very much about what you're putting your faith in and not getting sucked in by these kinds of people who, you know, will use the right words, but ultimately not have the right intentions behind them. And also not becoming one of those people in my line of work. That's something that's very important. You know, the film's title, Believe Me, is very much one that stuck with me because, you know, I'm not trying to get people to believe in me. Like that's not what I'm trying to do. And it's not it's not an ego thing. So that's kind of what stuck with me about the film. But, you know, I completely get what you're saying about, you know, the acting, and it's a starter indie film for someone who's gone on to, you know, do some other things that I think are worth checking out. He's actually doing a show for Max now about people who convert their vans into like full-on living spaces, and he's behind the scenes on that, which is a show that I've enjoyed. I think I actually brought it as an up next pick at one point here on the show. A bit like
Pimp My Ride with Exhibit back in the day.
Exactly. Yes. But you know, with the van life that's so so prolific now. But not every film is for everybody. I've just got to start working. I've got about 11 months now to really find a film that you don't already own that I can really wow you with. So I'll start working on my Christmas list for this next year, and let's say we do this again next January, okay?
I look forward to it, Devon. I look forward to my pick. I'm still waiting to hear what you think of Succession and Terrifier 3, so I'm sure we'll get to those in the coming months. He shakes his head, but it's going to happen.
Let's talk about our up next picks for this week. These are selected by us. We didn't assign these to each other. Do you want to go first, Sigmund?
Yeah, sure. A TV show pick, which is a rarity these days for me, but this was something that really flew completely under my radar. It's not a show that I've yet seen myself, but it's available right now on Hulu. It's called Whiskey on the Rocks. And the premise is that in the middle of the Cold War, a Soviet submarine runs aground outside of their kind of precinct, and suddenly Sweden finds itself at the centre of events, with the Prime Minister trying to resolve the conflict and avoid a world war between two nuclear powers while struggling with a wise foreign minister and a belligerent commander-in-chief. And this all sounds very, very heavy, but I can tell you, this is a comedic piece. There's a particular scene that reminded me very much in the trailer of Submerged on Apple Immersive Video. right, going through that nuclear submarine, except whilst everything went to plan for the most part in that, here, everything's going wrong. And it just looks really, really good. Subtitles, of course, because I think this is a like Swedish, Russian language in the most part, with English as well. Of course, US politicians get involved. Yeah, it just looks like a blast, and in more ways than one, I think, considering it's the Cold War and everything else. So, yes, I know, my puns, but at least, my jokes weren't as bad this week.
I'll take it. Good pick there, Sigmund. Whiskey on the Rocks. My pick this week has to be The Wild Robot, a film that it feels like everyone in my life has seen except me. And so I'm making plans to watch it this weekend when it comes out on Peacock. For those who haven't seen it, it's directed by Chris Sanders, features a lot of voices that you'll recognize, including Lupita Nyong'o, Pedro Pascal, Catherine O'Hara, Kit Connor, Mark Hamill, and others. And it follows Roz, a robot who washes up on an uninhabited island and befriends the local wildlife, including an orphan goose who Roz takes in. I watched the trailer for this one again this week in preparation, and once again I was just in awe of the gorgeous animation and the music. Even the trailer itself just takes you on an emotional journey, and that's what I've heard from everyone who's seen the film, is it's just so emotionally satisfying to watch. And it's also a kids and family film, so it's one that's good for the whole family, and I have to imagine has a good message with it. So I'm really excited to watch it this weekend. I've had people in my life come to me and tell me, Devon, you have to watch this film. Not like everyone has to watch this film, but you specifically have to watch this film, like people who know me well. So I really think this is going to be a good one for me. And, I'll let Noah kind of wander in and out as he wants to, but he loves animals. So I'm sure he'll get into that part and ask me what the names of all the animals are, because that's kind of the phase that he's in right now. I'm looking forward to The Wild Robot this weekend, and that is my up next pick.
One little tip, of course, whenever a feature film comes to a streaming service, normally the purchase price goes way down. Keep an eye on The Wild Robot this weekend, especially if you're an Apple Vision Pro user, because, of course, you'll be able to play back that film in 3D as well, and I highly, highly recommend that experience. Of course, the shared experience comes first, Devon, but yeah, the Vision Pro experience is extraordinary. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Magic Rays of Light. Of course, you can find everything that we've talked about this episode within the links in the show notes, and you can contact the show in a plethora of different ways. You can contact us on social media via the links in the show notes, and you can email the show or send us an iMessage to magic@macstories.net. And lastly, before we end this episode, we have reached the 1 year anniversary of joining Mac Stories and the team who've continue to write fantastic articles, a great weekly newsletter as well, and brilliant podcasts, if I say so myself, both in audio and video form. And it really has been quite a pleasure to be introduced to the Mac Stories family and audience and club members alike. So a big, big thank you to Federico, John, and the rest of the team. And of course, a big thank you to everyone that listens.
For sure. It's an honor to be a part of the Mac Stories family, and it's a privilege to get to hear from the Mac Stories community all the time about their feedback on the show, what they're thinking about, and what they're watching. So thank you all so much for an awesome year with Mac Stories, and here's to many more.
We'll be back next week to level up with Season 4 of Mythic Quest. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and have a great week.